The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's talk about genetically modified foods, something we haven't talked about in a little while. So we have this year's Nobel Prize winners for chemistry. They are saying that the fears about genetically modified foods are overblown and that society stands to benefit from the genetic modification of food. So what I want to do here is really go back to the beginning and kind of reset our discussion about GMO foods, since it's been a while since I've talked about it. There are some people in our audience who disagree with me about vaccines. There are some people in the audience who disagree with me about genetically modified foods. So to restate my view on genetically modified foods, my view is that based on the science I've read, there is no evidence that genetically modified foods are unhealthy for humans on the basis of being genetically modified. So let's parse that and make sure that I have clarity this evening. If a food is genetically modified and treated with toxic pesticides, it could be bad for human health because of the pesticides that are toxic, not because of the genetic modification. There is not evidence I've seen, and I've looked for it, that genetic modifications are bad for human health. Let's go through some of the typical rebuttal attempts and deal with them one by one. The most common rebuttal attempt is, David, what about that study with the rats? And what people are referring to when they mention the study with the rats is the Seralini GMO rat tumor study. So let's talk about that study. That study has been debunked by scientists. 3 specific studies have completely debunked the Seralini GMO rat tumor study. And in fact, that study has been retracted. Unfortunately, you may not have heard of that because GMO opponents continue to cite that study, continue to tout that study as evidence that GMOs are not healthy on the basis merely that they are genetically modified. Some of the problems with the Seralini GMO rat tumor study include that they used a strain of rats known to have really high rates of tumors, making it the exact wrong type of rat that you would want to use for the test. They had a very small sample size, and a number of conflicts of interest were uncovered in terms of the participants, the immediate and sort of more ancillary participants to that study. So that study is out. And there have been many studies which find no dangers from GMOs, which gets me to the next typical anti-GMO talking point, which is, hey, David, listen, it's possible that GMOs aren't damaging to human health, but we just don't know if GMOs are unhealthy for humans because we don't have any long-term testing and GMOs are so new. And of course, that's wrong. GMOs have been studied extensively. They first appeared in labs 30 years ago. They've been sold commercially since 1994. There are 1,700 peer-reviewed safety studies about GMOs, period. Now, to be clear, I have no horse in this. I know people will say either because of Soros or because I'm Jewish or because I'm a shill or because I'm in the pocket of the big food industry or whatever. Listen, I have no horse in this. You can be damn sure that if I thought science supported GMOs being unhealthy, I would be leading the charge against GMOs. However, that's not where the evidence is pointing. 141 Nobel laureates support GMO food and have signed on to a document making that clear. The attempt to discredit those 141 Nobel laureates is literally out of the climate denier handbook. The skeptics or the anti-GMO people are saying, okay, fine, listen, these are Nobel laureates, but their work isn't directly related to GMOs, so what the hell do they know? Which is the same thing we hear from the right about climate science. They say a lot of those so-called scientists don't actually work in climatology, even if they work in related fields. But when you look at the list of the 141 Nobel laureates who say we're in favor of GMO food, they work in chemistry, they work in medicine, which are very related to GMOs. Others admittedly work in physics and economics. Those are less related to GMOs. But the point is, the consensus from people working in a variety of fields on this is that there is not evidence that GMOs are harmful to human health on the basis of being genetically modified. Sadly, lots of the same people who fall for the anti-GMO stuff are the same people who fall for things labeled all natural or derived from natural ingredients on food products. And unfortunately, there's also crossover between the anti-vaxxers and the anti-GMO people. So, I think my main point here, Pat, is to just point out that, number one, the idea that I would have any interest in hiding that GMOs are bad for people, if that's what I believe, is crazy. I mean, there's no sensible way that someone could make that argument. This program is not the type of thing big pharma, big agriculture would even be interested in funding, and that's absolutely and totally silly. But most importantly, there are people who on most issues follow the science, and then on one issue, sometimes it's vaccinations, sometimes it's GMO, sometimes it's Russiagate, whatever, they seem to be disconnected from the facts on one particular issue, like it's their blind spot in a sense.
Right. It's poor critical thinking. And I'm not a scientist, so my approach to it is to just trust the overwhelming scientific majority's opinion. And that's what I do when it comes to climate change, and that's what I do with GMOs. I guess, another concern is labeling foods that are using GMOs. And I think that's something I can get behind just from a consumer's rights perspective. I think if people don't want to consume GMOs, they should be allowed to make that choice, and they should know what they're putting into their bodies. But that's sort of a separate issue.
It's a separate issue, and I agree with you that I'm totally fine with that labeling. I think in 15 years, that labeling will be silly and redundant because basically everything will be genetically modified to some degree. So I'm totally fine with that. I have zero opposition to that. I think it's fine. I think in 15 years, it's going to be seen as a completely irrelevant thing. And sort of along those lines, there are other issues with GMOs that are ancillary issues. Like, for example, patented seeds, which can be modified to not produce more seeds or to concentrate the ability to grow food by large corporations. Those are things related to GMO, which are problems, but they don't go to the health of the GMO. So let's criticize that. Using pesticides alongside GMO food. I don't like that. That's a problem. We've got to critically analyze each pesticide to see if it's harmful to human health. But that's separate than the health of the food on the basis of being genetically modified. There's another issue. When we look at crops, which might be genetically modified or not, that are damaging to the environment. Look at soybeans, for example. Soybeans require lime and synthetic fertilizer to grow in large quantities. Growing soybeans damages soil in ways that other crops don't. It can hurt biodiversity. It can contribute to soil erosion. Those are issues with soybeans, whether or not they've been genetically modified, and totally separate from the human health effects of that genetic modification. Anyway, these are some examples, but GMO, by virtue merely of being GMO, shouldn't be targeted by activists until we have actual evidence that it's bad for us. And right now, we simply don't have good evidence that that's the case. We have a great program for you today. I will be taking calls. I will be answering questions. We are going to, so Monday, I am scheduled to have jury duty. And I'm going to find out later today whether I have to report or not. I'm hoping that I don't, and that I can be here hosting the show on Monday. If not, we have gotten a tentative agreement from Farron Cousins of Ring of Fire. He is going to be standing by for the call from the court. If I have to be in court on Monday, Farron Cousins will be here on Monday, guest hosting the show. But in any case, then the rest of the week, unless I get pulled into some big trial, I will be here. Great program today. Great bonus show. Thanks for being with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Rex Riley. Rex, thank you for being a member of the David Pakman Show. We're mostly supported by really great people like Rex. You can join Rex and also today's longtime sustaining member of the day, Albert Candelaria, who's been with us for nearly 5 years. Join Albert and Rex by signing up at www.joinpacman.com. Coupon code is available if you want it. You don't have to use it, but you can save 40% if you use the coupon code. This is 2020. Okay, let's go to the phones. 617-830-4750. See what is on people's minds today. We will start with our caller from the 979 area code. Caller from 979. Who's this?
Hi, David. My name is Alejandro. I'm from College Station, Texas. I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm a really big fan of the show, and I've been, trying to get on the phone for like a while now, but I'm glad I got the chance.
Awesome, great. We're having somewhat of a bad connection, so I'm glad you got through, and if you can get to an area where your signal's better, that would be great. But what's on your mind today?
I just wanted to ask, you may have already addressed this in the past, but in regards to the migrant caravan and Trump's criticism of those undocumented immigrants that are also asylum seekers as well, on where you stand on that, and how could it be addressed in like the
well, so we've talked about different elements of it quite a bit. Number one, the danger posed by this migrant caravan has been an absolute and obvious political football. The discussions of it almost completely ceased after the midterm elections. When we reported on that in the days after, some people wrote to me and said, well, listen, everybody was reporting about the election results, so it makes sense that in the few days after it wouldn't come up. It's still barely coming up. And now that Donald Trump is starting to talk more about the wall, he's again starting to talk more about the migrant caravan. So on its face, it's a total political football. Number two, if you are an asylum seeker, then by definition, you are not a migrant criminal. You are coming to the United States to seek asylum. So there's that group of people as well. If you want to, there are people who are breaking the law. There are people who are not asylum seekers who are just trying to get in. And we already have laws about how to deal with that. So I'm just not even sure, like, what else is there really to talk about,
Yeah, and another thing, I saw an article, I can't recall the source or where exactly it was from, but there was an asylum seeker who was, already, at the border, and he was told to go back to Honduras, and I think he was about like 16 to 18, around that age range, and he told basically the people who were, who were there, that if you went back, you would die. And then upon, going back to this country of Honduras, come to know that, that he ended up, being killed. The reasons I can't recall exactly. It may have been, I don't know, just like extortion or something. But, that's kind of what, the part of the media that doesn't show, the struggles that some of them go through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Donald Trump has made it, a big part of his framing to bring up people who have had family members, for example, attacked or murdered, as Trump likes to say, by undocumented immigrants, or allegedly had that happen. The other side of that is exactly what you're describing. And, it's all a disgusting political football, even more so than debt and deficit, as we've talked about. And we have to make sure that we don't let them control the narrative on it, because that's how they end up sort of winning. And in a sense, I think it failed with the 2018 midterms, rather, and we'll see what sort of role it plays in the 2020 election. Thanks for the call, Alejandro. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for answering. Have a good day. Have a good holiday season.
Thank you. 617-830-4750. Let's see who is on the line from the 703 area code. Caller from 703. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're calling from and what's on your mind today.
Hi, my name is Matt Watkins. I've been watching for about a month now, and I've enjoyed everything you've put out. So, and my question is, Michael Cohen was just sentenced to 3 years today. What do you think is going to happen now? How do you think Trump's going to react to this? What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, Trump's framing has been that Cohen is a bad guy and that Cohen is lying in order to get his sentence reduced. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Trump say should have gotten more time to restate the fact that there's no collusion, to attack some people on Twitter. I mean, I think you're going to see the sort of usual antics from Donald Trump. I think increasingly the question is going to be, okay, so Cohen has his sentence and we now have a better understanding of how the felonies that he pled guilty to, he was directed to commit by Donald Trump. What's the next step in that trail, that sort of upward pyramid? What else does Mueller have? Who else is going to get pulled in here? So I still maintain that this is merely the beginning of this entire fiasco.
Yeah, I thought so too. Thank you.
All right.
I'm a big fan, and I'll continue to watch and listen.
Thank you. Really appreciate the call. Appreciate it. Great to hear from you. Okay, let's see who is holding on from the 972 area code. Caller from 972. Who's this?
This is Jamal Wright from Fort Worth, Texas.
What's going on, Jamal?
Hello. I had three questions I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Big fan.
Thank you.
First, I want to know how do you feel discussing stuff with Trump, the Trump base? Like, no matter you'll sit there and they'll start a discussion and they ask for facts, you'll prove it, and before they won't even open it or look at it, they're saying fake news, and then when they're discussing their points, they refuse to provide any, and they're like, you can look it up yourself.
Yeah, well, that's just a clear double standard, and I would call him out on it. Now, are you regularly arguing with Trump supporters?
I try not to, but it's just kind of hard seeing them say ridiculous stuff. Like I read something today where somebody was like, Nancy Pelosi is going to prison. And I'm like, what for? He says she's a criminal. How's she a criminal?
Yeah, I would bet that person money, right? I mean, it's that's just very silly. Are you engaged in these debates in person or online?
Online or whatever. In person, like nobody nobody really wants to admit that they support Trump, but online they feel like they can hide behind a keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my advice, because I talk about politics on this show, is just not to participate in any of that garbage. And I had a segment a couple of weeks ago where I said I made the mistake over the weekend of jumping into some Facebook friends' political threads, and it was just like a complete backfire. It was an exercise in just frustration for me, and so I'm not doing that. Now, if I didn't have a show, I might have more of a desire to argue and talk about politics, in which case it might be happening online. My strong advice would be point out that someone is not dealing in the realm of evidence. A good way to do that when they start playing these games where they deny that your evidence is accurate, but then won't provide any of their own and tell you to look it up. Try to switch the discussion into merely asking them how they came to hold their current beliefs and what might make them change their mind. You're still not going to get an answer, but at least you're going to shift the conversation into one where you can be exposing that they're not really operating in a world of fact, and that if they're not, then what's the point of even talking? And it's going to much more justify the fact that you're not really going to continue the conversation with them. That would be my approach, Jamal, but it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to change people's minds, I would say don't bother, and instead just try to get 5 or 10 more people to vote next time. That'll do much more good.
Okay, my next question is, do you think the whole thing about Trump wanting the wall is basically to keep himself from going to jail longer? Because if he's not, the statute of limits on his crimes will be about 5 years. So if he manages to get a second term just from getting the wall done, or his base believing that he wants the wall and is working towards it, it's going to keep him out of jail.
That's interesting. Ultimately, that will come down to whether or not you can indict a sitting president. And, the truth is that it's not, if he's done really serious things, it's not going to go 5 years, because you will have a situation where either it will be tested whether or not he can be indicted. Once the indictments are filed, even if it takes 5 years or more to figure out whether you can indict a sitting president, as long as the date of the initial indictment is within the statute of limitations, then you're good. Or he might end up being impeached or resigning. So I think that it's a really interesting political question, which is if he believes that the wall will get him reelected, could that be a way to run out the statute of limitations? Very interesting. I just don't think in the end it's ultimately going to matter. Jamal, thank you. I can't get to your third question today because I've got a lot of people holding, but I really appreciate your call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. 617-830-4750. Let's go next to our caller from the 207 area code. Caller from 207. Who's this? Where are you calling from? What's on your mind today? 207, are you there? Last chance, 207. If you muted your phone, we can't hear you. One more shot.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. My name is Eli. I'm calling from the Boston area. I'm calling about the video you made about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So I've got a little bit of a problem with it, honestly. And just full disclaimer, I like the show. I'm a member, and I followed you for a couple of months now. But I don't think you're giving her enough credit. For example, I think, the bigger issue is, when I see something pop up on my YouTube subscription feed that says, some negative, basically video thumbnail title about Ocasio-Cortez, I think, well, are you giving her credit where credit is due? And I know that in the video you said that you agree with her on most of the issues, but I feel like it's a little problematic, first of all, when you don't make similar videos about all the things she's doing right. I'm sure you covered her when she was running and when she won the primary, and that's important. But the little nitpicks about her tweets and whether or not it's like exactly the right strategy or whatever, I think it's kind of harmful. And so first of all, one of the things you mentioned in that video was she responded to Don Jr.'s trolling. Basically, he posted a meme or something, and she responded to it basically saying that he should be careful because the House will have subpoena power and it'll be a Democratic House in January. And you kind of framed it as if that was as if she was threatening to subpoena him or investigate him over some right-wing meme, and that's really not what she was doing. I mean, if you look at the context, basically what she's doing is she's just sort of like flexing her muscles and showing that she has the upper hand in this case, and that
hold on a second, hold on, Eli. You're saying a lot, and there's so much here that we could break down. So what you're saying is she's not actually threatening him with a subpoena. She's showing him that she has the strength to subpoena him, right? I mean, it seems like you're basically
I'm saying she's not threatening over the meme. I'm saying she's not threatening the subpoena over what he said with the right-wing meme.
Do you agree that it was widely interpreted to be what I said it was in that segment? Do you at least concede that part?
No, I don't agree because I get a lot of my news online and I read a lot of the comments, not usually on YouTube because those are kind of cancer, but I participate in Reddit discussions, and largely it seems like all these tweets of hers and how much she speaks out is actually having a really positive impact, and that people appreciate that she's finally calling out the people in power and doing so without even being in office yet.
Okay, so it sounds like you just haven't seen that there have been numerous articles, including some from legal experts, who say this is a really bad idea because even the appearance that she might be saying she might use the House's subpoena power in response to Donald Trump Jr.'s treatment of her. Even the appearance of that is problematic. So it sounds like you just didn't see that.
No, the article that I read about it specifically was from The Hill, I believe, and it seemed to paint her in a more positive light and didn't really put words in her mouth, which I think that's kind of what that's doing.
Okay, I guess we just disagree. I mean, to go back to it sounds like it seems like you didn't see a lot of the articles that explained why this was a bad idea. You saw an article that liked it, which is fine, but one article doesn't really tell us much. I guess I want to go back to the first
but I participate in the discussions and I try to see more perspectives, but I'm open to suggestions on where else to look if you think that my perspective is too narrow.
Yeah, I mean, I would just Google it. I don't have, I didn't know you were going to call in with this question, so I don't have links handy. I guess the bigger question is, you said that in every time I issue a critique of her, I should also, I guess, be mentioning the positive things she's doing, or you didn't like the ratio of negative to positive things that I said in that clip? Is that, I'm trying to understand the criticism.
It's less about the clip, because I saw that you did, specify that you agree with her on a lot of things within that clip. But the problem, I think, is that, when you think she's slipping up a little bit in some, minutia within tweets and stuff here and there, I saw that you can make a video of it, but she's been fighting for the Green New Deal, and she's been fighting for a lot of really great progressive causes and moving the conversation
forward. That's great. So I've spoken. So I guess here's what I'm asking you: when the rubber meets the road, I've spoken positively about those things in other clips. In the clip where I criticized her, I even went out of my way at the beginning, middle, and end of the video to say that she has the right ideas on many issues. This is way more than I do for almost anyone that I criticize on the show. What more did you want me to do?
I think it would...
Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out there.
Sorry, I must be a problem with my phone. So what I was going to...
You're cutting out again. Listen, I'm going to need you to just email me what it is you want me to do. We just can't hear you. But listen, I'm almost treating her with kid gloves. If there's any criticism, it's that I'm going too out of my way to couch my criticism in a positive way, which I barely ever do, specifically because I know people are going to say that it was an unfair criticism. So I'm not sure what else I can really do. Let's take a quick break. We will take more calls after the break. If you're holding, don't hang up. We'll be right back.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's go back to the phones at 617-830-4750. A lot of people holding, and we will go first to our caller from the 201 area code. Caller from 201, who's this? Where are you calling from? What's going on today?
David, can you hear me?
I can. There's a lot of background noise, but I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm Sabrina. I'm calling from New Jersey. I'm actually a PC grad. I'm a huge fan of yours. I just had a quick question about the age requirement for presidency. I read a Vice article today saying that the age requirement is really arbitrary and they're all for getting rid of an age requirement, and it was a really pro-AOC article. So I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, there's sort of two different questions. I mean, any age requirement for anything is in a sense arbitrary. I mean, are people really biologically adults at age 18? Should the age of consent be 17, 18, 19? Can we definitively say that you shouldn't be driving before you're 16 and a half? I mean, so I think the criticism that the age requirement is arbitrary is accurate, but it's sort of a meaningless criticism in the sense that, well, if you think it should be something else, then explain why. So I'm not sure what we get by saying that it's arbitrary. I mean, all age limits, speed limits are arbitrary. Is 35 really the right speed limit? Is 23 weeks really the point at which an abortion becomes not okay? I mean, there's sort of, that's kind of how the world works, right? So I'm not sure I understand that criticism.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of saying the founding fathers put it at 35 to uphold the status quo back then. I don't know what you think about that criticism, but I was wondering if you'd be for getting rid of an age requirement and just basing presidencies on policy.
You know, my tendency is to just be more libertarian when it comes to elections. Like, hey, if somebody is out there who's 17 and the country says this should be the president, then let them have it. Then I realized that Donald Trump became president of the United States and that you might actually end up with some 17-year-old who is put in there by low information voters. Now, is it the government's job to have rules that protect the country from what the population wants? Maybe not, right? You could argue, no, that's like a nanny state thing. If people want to elect that person, then elect them. I've not given much thought to the age requirement for the presidency. If you asked me 10 years ago, I might have said that the age limit should be higher than 35, not lower. But I think I've probably changed my view on that. I'd have to think about it more.
Okay, I totally get that. And I have a separate question related to AOC. A lot of people see her as the new face of the Democratic Party. 10 years down the line, Democratic Party is going to be, just very progressive. I mean, do you see that as true, or do you see there will be sort of a new, refurbishing of, people like Joe Biden or, a lot of other centrist liberals? Or how do you see it going in the future?
I hope that the Democratic Party does keep moving to the left, whether Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is, a data point in that movement or ends up being an exception to the rule and the liberalization of the Democratic Party comes from elsewhere. I don't really know, but I think that we already have an electorate that has moved to the left significantly. So we should have elected officials that also represent that. And if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to be part of a movement where that happens, that's really great, as many people know. And as I was criticized for last segment, I think that she is lacking knowledge on many issues. And so it would be great if in those next 10 years, if that is going to see her become a leader of the Democratic Party and of the left, it would be great if by that time she is super informed on all of the issues. I think that would be a necessary thing if she is going to become one of those leaders. But I hope that this is the beginning of a significant move to the left for the Democratic Party, for sure.
Okay, I have one more question if you have time.
Okay.
Okay, so I was just wondering, I was just thinking back to relating Trump to Nixon, and I was thinking after Nixon's presidency, that the Republican Party sort of got stronger in a way with Ronald Reagan, and they sort of remodeled the party and it just became stronger. So do you fear that after this whole Trump fiasco ends, the Republican Party might actually start to build itself stronger? And I don't see that really happening with the Democrats right now. So
I do worry about that, but I worry about it in a slightly different way than what you're talking about with Nixon into Reagan. If Donald Trump in many ways has been a disaster for the Republican Party, and a lot of Republicans are standing behind him only to not be attacked by him, but not because they actually are supportive of what Trump represents politically. My concern from Trump's presence is not that the Republican Party will say, hey, let's go in the Trump direction and have all this sort of reorganization around candidates like Trump. It's that the voters on the right will be more open to totally clueless, uninformed, narcissists like Trump, and that Trump will only be the beginning in these sort of extremely low information, clueless sycophants, and that it's the start of that. That's really my concern.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for taking the call, David.
Appreciate it. Yep. Thanks. Call back anytime. 617-830-4750. Let's see who's calling from the 925 area code. Caller from 925. Who's there? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
That is you.
Hey, what's up, man? I love your show. I'm Sean from Concord. My question is pertaining to the 2020 presidential election.
Okay.
I believe Bernie Sanders will run, and I think he'll be the front runner at the start of the primaries. We have seen a lot of former corporate Democrats stop taking money from the corporations. The argument, of course, is that corporate campaign donations corrupt the politicians. So I think I have a pretty solid offensive strategy to that. So the question the people could ask Booker and Harris and the others is, like, if, when you were taking corporate money, were you being corrupted? And if not, then why did you stop taking the money? Like, do you think this argument holds water?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I think there's a couple different things there. One is Bernie being the front runner. He would be my front runner in the sense that he's the member of the Senate with whom I am most aligned politically, for sure. Interestingly, some of the early polls already don't have Bernie in first place and sometimes not even in second place. I saw an early poll here in Massachusetts, and it was like Biden, Warren, Bernie, or it was maybe Biden, Bernie, Warren, which is even more interesting since Elizabeth Warren is the Massachusetts senator. Now, Massachusetts doesn't necessarily determine who the country is going to select, but I think that we already have some polling data which points to it's going to be a contested primary for the Democrats, and it could take a while to figure out who the nominee is going to be. That's number one. Number two, as far as the PAC money stuff, I love the question of if there was nothing happening that was unsavory by virtue of you taking PAC money, why did you stop? But they're going to have pretty simple answers to that. They'll say, listen, I have always been against that system, and I am thrilled now that we are able to move away from that funding system. I was never unfairly influenced, right? I mean, they'll come up with talking points. You're not really going to trip them up. So I think it's a great question. I just don't think you're really going to trick anybody with it.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, the way I look at it is just, I mean, they were obviously, and then also I guess another question then after that would be, so like Kyle Kulinski did this video where he showed how much money they're actually getting from contributions from corporate. And it's actually like for Kamala Harris, I think it was like 6%. And for the others, it was all smaller. Most of their money actually comes from large contributions. So do you think that that's kind of like the next step in kind of getting the Democratic Party to go in that direction? Because Kamala Harris may not take money, let's say, from, you know, AT&T or whatever, but she'll start taking money from the CEO of AT&T and all those people, you know, and that she'll get the large contributions. Do you think they're still going to be corrupted in that sense?
Well, I think that you're going to have a much harder time fighting that unless you actually just change what the maximum limit is, because there's going to be, if you're Bernie Sanders and you celebrate that your average contribution is $7.50, that's great. But if the maximum that one is allowed to give is $2,000, for example, it's going to be self-defeating for candidates to say, I will not accept donations over $100. Like that's going to be, that's sort of like unilateral disarmament. The not taking corporate PAC money has a very particular, there's a very clear line that's drawn between PAC money and individual donations. Once you get into the range of individual donations, who's to say that a $501 donation would be a corrupting influence, but a $499 one wouldn't be? Because in the end, you're just talking about people. And in a way, shouldn't we want a candidate that we like to be as well-funded as possible? So you get into a weird thing. So I think that the only way to really deal with that is to say, the legal limit for donations is going to be lowered. Other than that, I think it's going to be self-defeating for candidates to say, I will not accept donations over $500 or $200, especially because then they can, I mean, strictly speaking, it's against the law, but if they want to donate $1,000, they can just have each of their kids make the donation or whatever. Like that, I just think it's much messier. I don't think it'll work.
Right, because I know that Harris, like a lot of the Clinton camp went over to Harris's campaign, and she stopped taking corporate PAC money, but it's only 6% of her, you know, income. And I just keep asking myself, is she uncorrupted still? Like, do I believe that she's uncorrupted? And I don't know if I'm on board with that. You know,
well, Kamala Harris has made some Kamala Harris has made some prosecutorial decisions as back in her old role in California that I've still not seen good explanations for. It kind of exceeds the scope of this segment.
Mulvaney?
I'm sorry, what was that? Oh, the Mulvaney. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll address that at some point. I really appreciate the call. I want to get to a couple other people before we have to go to break. Thanks for calling in. 617-830-4750. Let's try our caller from the 530 area code. Caller from 530. Who's this?
Hello, David. My name's Scott. I'm calling from Sacramento.
Great. What's going on, Scott?
I wanted to get your take on South Africa just passing the land reform bill in their Congress with the EFF and the ANC, and what you thought about that, what the implications might be going forward.
Haven't read about it yet.
Okay, sounds good. I have some concerns about private property rights and about what are the implications for some individual rights as well. So if you don't have a take, that's fine. It's been a concern of mine in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I have not read up on that yet. It's been a pretty busy couple of weeks, but I will hope to get to that.
Sounds great. I'm a big fan since I saw you slaughter Jesse Lee Peterson. That was the first my first exposure to you, and that was hilarious. I particularly related to your statement about being a-religious. I thought that was a really good take, because I've been struggling myself exactly that. So thank you very much. All
right. Appreciate the call. Thank you. Jesse Lee Peterson convert. I appreciate it. Okay. Let's go to our caller from the 404 area code. A caller from 404. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Me?
That is you. Who's this?
Okay. Hi, David. My name is Brittany. I've been listening to your show since I was like 16 when you had Midweek Politics with Natan and Lewis.
Great.
So I just really wanted to thank you for really helping me like shape my political identity. And oh my God, I'm so nervous.
That's okay. You're doing great so far. So far, all great things you're saying.
So I kind of wanted to ask a question not related to politics. I know you talk about that all day. It's kind of a weird question, but so I was just wondering, my minor's in Spanish right now, and I'm studying it in school, and I never really heard you speak that much Spanish, and I was just really curious as to what it sounds like from you. So I was wondering if you could say something. Actually, my sister's telling me to say it in Spanish. Okay. So me estaba preguntando si podría decir una frase en español, por favor, por favor.
Sí,
Gracias.
¿qué frase querés que diga?
Oh, that was perfect. Quizás podría decir, thank you, Brittany, for calling in, and I'm really happy that you called into the program or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, Brittany, gracias por llamar. Estoy encantado que hayas llamado hoy.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, I'll be doing
Perfect.
requests
Thank you.
all day, folks. Any other languages you want, just call in and ask, okay?
Thank you so much, David.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the call. Okay, I'm out of time. On that note, a great call to end on. Sorry to the 27 people holding I didn't get to. I really do apologize, but I'm out of time. I will take calls again. That I promise you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, let's get right into audience questions for the week. There are some important ones this week, notable in that they relate to what seems to be sort of an understanding from the left that things are changing. And we'll see if you agree that the questions this week seem to have that theme. First question. Hey, David, I like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but I think she keeps saying really dumb things in interviews. She seems totally unprepared. What advice would you give her? Yeah, so earlier this week, I discussed that while I believe AOC has a lot of the right ideas, on some things, maybe she's a little less right, but for the most part, she has a lot of the right ideas. I pointed out that she is saying some dumb things, and that if you can't communicate ideas effectively or be prepared to answer basic questions about your ideas, you actually do more damage to the movement than maybe you help it, because it becomes a data point that our opponents politically can point to and say, look, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has idea X, and she gets to talk about it in corporate media, and here's how bad it went when she did. So even though the ideas are good, if she can't defend them, then it is a liability. So my advice, not that she's looking for my advice and not that I'm the right person to be giving her advice, would be basically twofold. Number one, and I assume she's going to do this, you've got to get media training, okay? It was very clear from the interviews she gave during her campaign that her media training was lacking or non-existent. And by that, I don't mean experience doing interviews. I mean, there are media trainers who will explain to you how to not get wrapped up in logic and semantic games by the interviewer, how to pivot, how to, when you are asked a loaded or unfair question, coming prepared with the 5 most likely ways that your point of view will be challenged and exactly how to respond in a way that doesn't open you up to more criticism. This is a skill that you can learn. Not everybody is as naturally talented at it, I would say. There are people who are just naturally better and others who struggle more. But it's a skill that can be learned. Not everybody can be a superstar, but I think anybody who is clearly of the level of intelligence that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has can be way better than she is. So she has to get media training like yesterday. And I'm guessing that as part of her becoming a member of Congress, with the Congress ready to be sworn in January 2019, that's going to happen. And if she doesn't get that, it almost doesn't matter how good her ideas are, because she's going to get crushed. It's the same thing with Trump. Trump's ideas are terrible. I mean, truly terrible ideas. And he knows nothing about most of the topics that relate to those ideas: trade, economics, currency, all of this stuff. But he was able to portray a degree of confidence that people voted for him thinking he knows about trade. He knows about economics. His experience running businesses, many of which filed for bankruptcy, is going to translate into being a good president. So perception is reality, and the perception that people are getting from these AOC interviews is that not only is she unprepared, but that the ideas are bad, and that risks taking down the entire movement. The other thing is, I might stop tweeting, okay? And what I mean by that is, in the same way that Donald Trump has gotten himself into way more trouble than he would otherwise be in with regard to Trump-Russia, it would be a really good idea for AOC to stop tweeting things like implied threats to Donald Trump Jr. to use Congress's subpoena power for what might be political vendettas. Now, I know the defense is, no, she's just saying, if you've done stuff wrong, we are going to use subpoena power to find that out. She also maybe needs to be advised as to what it does and doesn't make sense to tweet, because my prediction is she's not going to be as Teflon as Donald Trump has been with regard to tweets. And even though tweets have caused a lot of problems for Trump, they've also, a lot of stuff that he's tweeted that has been outrageous has not caused a problem for him. I think it's risky for her to employ the same thing. Better training, media training, maybe ease up a little bit on the tweets, and she hopefully will be able to do just fine. Next question today. Hey, David, many of the top contenders for the Democratic 2020 nomination are pretty old. I'm not being ageist, but should Democrats consider age when they choose their 2020 candidate? The answer is yes, in the sense that age is a reasonable factor to consider, right? Bernie Sanders, I'm going from memory, but in 2020, or maybe at the time of the inauguration, roughly, I don't know, Bernie's going to be 79, close to 80. Joe Biden, another presumed frontrunner, 78, will be. Michael Bloomberg, who has switched back to the Democratic Party, 78, I believe, would be at the time. John Kerry would be in his upper 70s, even though he said he doesn't have any plan to run. Elizabeth Warren would be 71, which is comparatively young relative to these other contenders. This is arguably more about perception than it is in terms of the impact as far as actual health. Most of these individuals, to the extent that we know, are probably as healthy, if not healthier, than Donald Trump, who is obese, quite frankly, or borderline obese by within a pound or two of being borderline obese, depending on which numbers you believe, eats very unhealthily, has a very unhealthy lifestyle. So it's not really about the impact that age would have on their ability to do the job. For me, it's more about the perception to need to change the guard of the Democratic Party. The, quote, old guard of the Democratic Party. And by that, I mean people who have been around for a while, but also just people who are older and haven't necessarily been around as long, like Elizabeth Warren. They are seen as part of the problem of what happened in the 2016 Democratic primary, fairly or unfairly. I would argue in some cases fairly, in some cases a little bit less fairly. Bernie Sanders, of course, the exception to that because he was the victim of what happened in the 2016 Democratic primary. Other than Bernie, I'm not sure that anybody on that list really gives the perception of changing the guard. I know Elizabeth Warren's political positions are almost as left as Bernie's, but she is seen much more as establishment Massachusetts Democrat, also because of her background, her corporate background, than Bernie Sanders is. Bloomberg used to be a Democrat, now is back to being a Democrat. There's not too many more establishment type people than Michael Bloomberg. He's another super rich old white guy. And that's the sort of, you need another guy like Trump to fight Trump, but Trump would mop the floor with Michael Bloomberg, quite frankly, rhetorically, with his insult games and his tweets and his nicknames. But Democrats shouldn't fall for the whole we need a fresh-faced youngster thing, because it resonates really loudly with other young voters, the idea of, I mean, I don't think anybody's talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running for president, but other young Democrats, Joaquin Castro, for example, I don't know who else, but you need votes from Democrats and moderates, independents in a lot of parts of the country where those youngsters are not going to be as appealing. Now, without endorsing anyone, I don't even know who's running, okay? But I understand the appeal of someone like Sherrod Brown strategically. He's interesting because he won't be close to 80 at the time of the inauguration. He's in his mid-60s right now. He has experience. He's a reasonable progressive. He's not the most progressive guy, but he's a reasonable progressive. He's from the Midwest, which will appeal to another set of voters, and he would not be subject to successful attacks against him along certain lines that some other people would. Now, politically, I still line up way more, you know where I'm going, with Bernie Sanders, and I would be likely to support Bernie Sanders in the primary if he ran. But there's a part of me that's wondering about Sherrod Brown, although it's unclear if he can handle Trump's games, and that is an open question. Hey, David, do you see the offensive use of nuclear weapons happening during your lifetime? Okay, this question, we could go on for an hour about this, but to sort of sum up my view, I'm going to take a sort of naive perspective. I admit it might be naive. I don't think we will see the use of offensive nuclear weapons during my lifetime. Now, when I say this, I don't mean that there will be no offensive use of extremely powerful weapons during my lifetime. What I mean is more of a technological argument, which is that dirty bombs that are far less powerful than nukes, as well as biochemical warfare and even cyber attacks, are going to allow for some of the same objectives that nuking a country might allow for: a show of force, an attempt to either attack or make political points or whatever, show strength, dominance, without damaging huge swaths of land via radiation, making them unusable, in addition to the physical killing of countless people. And in the 21st century, in the 22nd century, it increasingly seems to me that those are going to be the types of warfare that are fought. I mean, look at how much warfare has already changed over the last 40 years, even with the advent of drone warfare and so many other technologies, that I think it's much more likely that we would see a dirty bomb maybe detonated, that we would see biochemical warfare used to the same crippling effect as a nuclear weapon conceivably could. But I see the continued use of nukes to say, look, we have nukes, you can't nuke us. But it's hard to imagine a nation going so rogue that they say we're going to destroy a huge part of the world. Now, you may hear me say this and say, David, that's exactly what people thought before the U.S. twice used nuclear weapons. And I agree with you. And I may well be wrong. In 50 years, this video, we may watch it and say, boy, how wrong was David. But I think it's more likely that we will see the offensive use of biochemical attacks, potentially a dirty bomb, and cyber. If you disagree with me, let me know. We've got a great bonus show for you today and so much other great stuff happening next week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.